I love RPGs. In fact, I love them so much that they're my favorite genre of game. Now, I'm not talking about rocket launchers or something like Dungeons and Dragons, considering you kind of need to have friends to do that. So what I'm obviously referring to are role-playing video games. I very much do favor RPGs that are made in Japan, but with video games being such an important part of my life, all RPGs of any kind will always have a soft spot in my heart. But why is that exactly? And which ones exactly are the ones that have quite frequently changed my life? Well, considering this year has been basically the year of the RPG, and with SMT 5 Vengeance out already, or out soon depending on when I finish this video, I figured now is as good a time as any. For many people, the main factor that draws them into playing an RPG are the stories, the worlds, the characters, the music, and the general journey that they embark on with each one. These are of course factors that I consider too, but they aren't the main appeal for me, and that's because the main thing I love about them is gameplay that you would struggle to experience playing other genres. Now, my second favorite genre is without a doubt, and I know this will sound completely contradictory, but it's first-person shooters. You can get many similar positive aspects from an FPS that you can from an RPG, but it's the collection of these great things that truly makes RPGs special. For example, you can get an amazing story from a game like Titanfall 2, you can get a beautiful and immersive world from Halo, you can get iconic characters in the Call of Duty games, you can get some absolutely awesome music from Doom, and you can experience a great journey from playing Destiny, although that last one is a bit more because they refuse to let the game die. And I can tell you right now, I definitely do love the games I listed, except for Destiny, ignore the profile picture. But in comparison to some of my favorite RPGs, it just isn't the same. And to start off this list, I'll look at some of the ones I've played recently. The most recent was a surprise hit, being Unicorn Overlord. It was a game that, to me at least, sort of came out of nowhere, and when I saw it I kinda honestly thought that it looked mid as hell. But then there were some trailers and stuff I saw for it online, and I realized it looked a bit like Fire Emblem, which is a franchise I'll definitely talk about later. Then when it got closer to the release, I tried the demo, cause why not, and thought it was okay. Then when the game finally released, I was actually offered a code for the game, and when I responded saying, yeah sure, why not, they did not get back to me. So I ended up paying for the game, and what a brilliant decision I made, because it was a really fun game. I played it on the hardest possible difficulty you could do for a first playthrough, and unfortunately it was incredibly easy. But it's okay, because there's nothing wrong at all with an easy game. But a prominent thing that made me want to keep on playing Unicorn Overlord was the freedom of customization that you had. Now, there were some character customization elements I barely touched, where you can change the color of your hair or clothes or whatever, but I mean more the customizing of strategies that you could do. The game had many different skills, accessories, weapons, and classes that you could take advantage of in various ways to create the most optimal team. Now, I don't know if my teams were actually the most optimal, but considering I never struggled, I can only assume they were pretty good. But sitting there for what felt like hours trying to finely tune all of my units and constructing complex strategies with how your party used their skills and attacks felt like I was handcrafting a masterpiece of strategy. And RPGs often provide an opportunity to strategically structure your party or units or whatever to make you as the player feel like you have outsmarted the game itself. You can look the game in the eyes and say, aha! I have combined this unit with this unit, and now I have this really good setup for every possible situation in battle. You have been fooled, game. But in reality, the game was designed knowing you would do that. Now, in something like COD, you can of course customize weapons and loadouts, especially the modern CODs, providing a much more detailed weaponsmith. But it's different to an RPG in that you can still use the default level 1 loadouts and win just as well as having a maxed out account. Optimizing your strategy in an RPG is not to help make winning easier, but instead, it's to make winning possible in the first place, and I love that. But then another recent RPG was Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, which to those of you watching this who watch my channel, first of all, TY cheers big dog, I appreciate it. But if you don't know who the hell I am, well, let's just say I'm a big fan of the Like a Dragon series. And Infinite Wealth, as well as its predecessor, Yakuza Like a Dragon, are both kind of average RPGs. They're both awesome games, but considering they're both turn-based RPGs, they kind of lack a lot of the things that make an RPG good. And yet, despite that, they still provide a unique experience you can't get anywhere else. And an element I very much enjoy from them is that feeling of progression. Many games have various progression systems. For example, in COD again, you level up constantly from multiplayer matches, and you can level up your guns and earn various mastery camos and all that sort of stuff. But in RPGs, it always feels like you're being rewarded with valuable rewards in the form of leveling up to gain higher stats, getting better gear, unlocking new spells and abilities, adding new party members, doing all kinds of stuff. And in Infinite Wealth, something I enjoyed in my playthrough of it was unlocking and earning all sorts of new things. I very much enjoyed being too poor to buy certain things and having to ration my spending early game, to now where I have like $100 million at all time, getting new party members, unlocking new jobs, upgrading my weapons. All of those things made me feel like I was working towards an end goal, and these elements always kept me aware of whether or not I was going in the right direction. Now, if you watched my previous videos, you'll definitely know that other RPGs do a much better job, but even just small things like being able to use a skill more than twice before running too low on MP was a very small way to make me feel like I had achieved something. But of course, the main benefit that these two Yakuza games have over all other RPGs is that they are Yakuza games, and in all honesty, they are more Yakuza than RPG. But if you want to know two examples of two RPG franchises I absolutely love that both do an excellent job with strategizing and progression, then you need to look no further than another Atlas/Sega series, and another one I mentioned a bit earlier. The Atlas one is none other than the Shin Megami Tensei or Persona series. But before I talk about it, I thought I would share a little bit of trivia of how I got into this series back in 2020. Now then, I want you to try and guess which SMT or Persona game was my first. Was it option A, Persona 5 Royal? Shortly after Joker got added to Smash, my curiosity for Persona 5 increased, and they announced Persona 5 Royal, so I may have just sat around and waited for it. Or perhaps it was option B, being the PC release of Persona 4. Or maybe you might think it was option C, being SMT4 on the 3DS, which is a game I constantly use the music from as background music in my videos, and it's probably my favorite game in the series. So perhaps I bought it in 2020 and I'm one of those people whose first is always their favorite. Now, if you said option A, being Persona 5 Royal, which is definitely a game a lot of people got into the franchise with, you would be dead wrong. In fact, if you said option B or C as well, you still would have been wrong, because it was actually a game called Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Sharp Encore Omega Enhanced Edition for the Nintendo Switch edition on the Switch. What? I hear you muttering to yourself under your breath. Yes, that was indeed my first SMT game, and I got it because I was already into the Fire Emblem series and figured, hey, may as well try out this SMT business before Persona 5 Royal. It was definitely more an SMT game than a Fire Emblem game. In fact, it kind of barely has anything to do with Fire Emblem in terms of gameplay. But still, I started to learn that the SMT series has some very intense strategizing required. You need to be able to build your party of demons or personas to counter their weaknesses, as well as exploiting the weaknesses of the enemy. And there are so many demons across the series, and although you typically have to constantly part ways with them by fusing them into others, you really get the feeling that you're building this ultimate team whenever you use the mechanics of the game to your advantage and conquer a strong enemy. For example, incredibly early in SMT4, when your level is around the low 20s, you come across a level 75 boss. A lot of RPGs like to do that, throw some strong boss at you early game to show you what you need to strive for so that you can come back later when you're stronger and finally kick its butt. Not SMT4 though, definitely not, because instead you can and are in fact supposed to beat it. So by utilizing what you've learned and gathered so far, you can try and get a demon that resists, reflects, or absorbs gun and or electric damage, and try to deal as much fire damage as possible. And if all goes smoothly, that's that level 75 boss done and dusted. And when I fought that boss, it felt so satisfying. It felt like an absolute genius. It felt like I had conquered something that reasonably shouldn't have been possible. And that's the thing that, again, I personally feel is unique to RPGs, being the ability to craft your own answer to a question. It's different to a puzzle game or just a puzzle in a game, because you know that there is a definitive answer you have to get right, but in something like SMT, the game does a good job at tricking you into thinking there isn't an answer, but you still manage to figure it out yourself anyway. It's like when you do exams in school and the teacher says there is no correct answer, but there very clearly is. You know what I mean? But anyway, I've mentioned it already a few times now, but it's time to talk about the Fire Emblem games. These games do an excellent job when it comes to the growth of your skills as a player and the skills of a unit. As you progress through a Fire Emblem game, you're unlocking the advanced versions of your character's classes, your stats are increasing just enough to always feel a noticeable difference, your weapons are getting stronger and more durable, and eventually the game just starts giving you cool shit as a reward for doing what you've been doing. And just like SMT, you truly do get a joyous sensation from thinking that you're kicking the game's ass and you're using 100% of your brain for a certain chapter, even though the game is basically pointing at things that in retrospect are very obvious. Oh hey, the devs say, we're going to teach you how to properly utilize armored units because we just gave you a really strong armored guy, and conveniently every enemy on the map has a bow that will do 0 damage or magic that'll do 100. And you know, I may as well mention how I got into Fire Emblem because I think it's kind of funny. Now, gameplay is still the main draw for me, but like I said at the start, story and music and stuff are also definitely deciding factors for me as to whether or not I like a game. So I had already heard a few original or remixed Fire Emblem tracks in Smash Bros, but one day, completely randomly, I decided to type into YouTube epic Fire Emblem music. And I mean that literally, this is exactly what I typed into the YouTube search. And the first result was the final boss theme from the remake of the second ever Fire Emblem game, with that remake being Fire Emblem Echoes. Now, I do not exaggerate when I say that the first time I heard Twilight of the Gods, my jaw was just on the floor. I mean, listen to this shit. So a few days after hearing this song, I headed to my local EB Games and grabbed whatever Fire Emblem games I could find. Now this was back in 2018 or 2019, I don't remember. But it was before EB Games became a store where you go if you care so little about money that you'd gladly spend it on a pathetic excuse for a business. And by that I mean it was when these piece of shit stores sold pre-owned games that weren't exclusively PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Nintendo Switch games. But anyway, I managed to get Fire Emblem Fates Conquest and Fire Emblem Awakening. I played Conquest first because I played a lot of Corrin and Smash 4, and I'm serious, that was the reason. And man, I was in love. I was just having so much bloody fun. A few months later, I managed to get Fire Emblem Echoes at the same store, and I was very glad I did. I finally got to play the game that had the song that got me into the series, and holy shit, I wasn't at all expecting to hear the greatest acting performance in anything I've ever heard, as well as some of the best written dialogue I've ever read. On top of that, all of the music was phenomenal. And in quite the similarity, there's another RPG series I fell in love with thanks to purely the music alone. That being Xenoblade Chronicles. Now, just like Fire Emblem, I only knew of Xenoblade thanks to Shulk's inclusion in Smash Bros. It wasn't too long after properly listening to a couple of Xenoblade songs for the first time that I looked up how to play Xenoblade and saw that it was on the Wii, but it also had just come out on the 3DS. So literally, without looking at any gameplay or anything at all about what the game was like, I just went to the same local EB Games, grabbed Xenoblade from the shelf and walked up to the counter. And funny story, the guy at the counter was all like, "Hey man, you see gameplay for this game? It's got a kind of weird battle system, you know, like it's not really something a lot of people can get into. You sure you want this game, bro?" He probably saw a kid like me and assumed that I would have preferred to just grab the newest COD or Pokemon game, but I just straight up lied and said, "Yeah, I saw gameplay." No, I didn't, but it didn't matter, because I bought it anyway and started playing it on the drive home. Oh my god, I am so glad I did. Holy shit, it very quickly became one of, if not the most amazing experience I ever had at that point in my life. The music, the gameplay, the areas, the story, the voice acting, the dialogue, the fucking everything. It was indescribably brilliant. I'm so glad I didn't listen to that guy at the shop. And just as a side note, there are two songs I want to specifically point out. The first was a song called Mechanical Rhythm. When I was 14, I really didn't like metal. I had a very limited taste in music back then, in all honesty. So when I got up to the part in the game when Mechanical Rhythm started playing, I really didn't care about listening to the song, especially since a lot of the time I played without headphones, so I just kept the game muted when I was around other people as to not disturb like my mum or whoever. But after doing a fight for a little while, I decided to just turn up the music to see if it was still playing that metal song, and conveniently, this part of the song started playing. I was a goddamn fool. How could I have been so stupid? This is incredible. I honestly do remember everything about this one event, even down to the mechon I was fighting. Like, it's all in my head to this very day. And from that day forth, I played the game with headphones to make sure I never missed hearing any music ever again. But then the other song was the main theme. There was a day where I launched the game, and as it was loading, I just went and did something else real quick. Now, the title theme I never really listened to, as I just skipped right into the game every time. But this time, because I just left it running, I came back to see the sun had set in the title screen, and I turned up the music, and, well, I'll let the music do the talking. I feel like anyone who has played Xenoblade Chronicles is undoubtedly a fan of Xenoblade Chronicles, and if you're not, I think you're quite simply just stupid. Eventually X came out on the Wii U and I played the shit out of that, same with 2 on the Switch, and then as time went on we got Xenoblade 3, aka Game of the Year 2022 if you're based. And speaking of, my Wii U save file of Xenoblade X unfortunately got wiped because it was on a USB and the Wii U sucks so it corrupted, but I've been replaying X on the CMU, I think that's what it is, emulator, and man, I would definitely recommend it. It is so good to play Xenoblade X with an actually readable font, man. Like, you have no idea. But then there's the Pokémon series, a series which I own every mainline game and almost all of the spin-offs for, a series that has been a prominent part of both my childhood and adult life, a series that I have always been in love with. In fact, the very first video game I ever played was Pokémon Yellow. I remember playing it before I could even read. Now when I played it, Pokémon was already up to the 3rd generation, and the only reason I played Yellow was because of my older brothers owning it, and I'm very glad that they did. Throughout the course of my life, I've always been playing Pokémon. Even recently, I went back and beat Pokémon Black and White, Black 2, White 2 again, as well as Ultra Sun. A lot of people weirdly don't think of these games as turn-based RPGs, but they're easily the most iconic RPGs of all time. They're also seen as children's games that require no strategy, but you'll especially know this if you get into competitive Pokémon battling, that the Pokémon games are probably the most complex and bloody confusing games ever created. There's literally over 1,000 Pokémon, including a shitload of abilities and moves that just make the whole series so in-depth. And just like the other games I've mentioned so far, their soundtracks are all things that have burnt themselves into my brain. I've listened to so many Pokémon songs so many times that I feel like I can physically see the music at this point, but I'm more than happy to go insane from listening to Pokémon music too much. Playing through a new generation every time was always so much fun to see the cool and wacky new Pokémon that they'd add, and each game ending by having you walk back home really does sell the idea of this journey you embark on from the front door of your house to every corner of the world. But despite Pokémon getting me into video games, they were actually the only turn-based RPGs I ever played for more than half my life. I played a shitload of Skyrim and RuneScape and stuff, but those weren't turn-based, and in my stupid childish eyes, I've never really saw them as RPGs either, but that all properly changed when I got into the Final Fantasy series. You see, I had already played a lot of Kingdom Hearts, especially 1 and 2 on the PS2, PS3, and the PS4, but despite my love of Kingdom Hearts, for some reason I was never interested in Final Fantasy. Perhaps, understandably, the only turn-based games I was willing to endure were the Pokémon games, but it wasn't until 2015 when I started playing Final Fantasy VII, except only for a little bit. I didn't get too far into the game and I gave up, which I can gather from my Steam achievements back in the day. But then it all picked up again in 2017, which was after I played my beloved Final Fantasy 15. I saw it and thought, hey, this looks like it plays like Kingdom Hearts, maybe I'll give it a go. And I'm so glad I did. I absolutely loved that game, and even at my young age, I could see the problems that the game had, but they never bothered me enough to stop me from playing. I ended up getting the Platinum Trophy in a month, which for me was an incredible feat. In fact, I was apparently the 25th PlayStation player to earn an Emperor Deposed trophy in the Episode Prompto DLC. I ended up doing like 5 playthroughs in total after the PC version came out, and I racked up hundreds of hours playing the game, and thanks to loving it so much, I was willing to go and play the others. I eventually at least played a bit of all the mainline games besides 11, and a bunch of different spin-offs, although of the mainline games I only beat 1, 8, 12, and 14 up to the start of Stormblood. But speaking of spin-offs, I got to play literally one of the most based games ever created, being Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin, which is a long name, but it's worthy of a long name because it kicks ass. But thanks to enjoying the hell out of the Final Fantasy games, I was willing to try more RPGs. In all honesty, I think it's safe to say that thanks to Final Fantasy, I played all of the games I mentioned in this video, besides Pokemon Kingdom Hearts obviously. But all of this love for Final Fantasy brings me to one final game. A recent game on the PS5, and no, I don't mean 7 Rebirth, I mean Final Fantasy 16. Many moons ago, when it was revealed, I thought, damn, that looks sick. I'm excited to play that on my PS5, surely it comes out in like 2021, right? Wrong. We waited years for 16. We waited to see if it could live up to our expectations, and eventually we come around to the release of the demo. All the trailers so far certainly looked interesting, but was it actually? Well, after completing the demo, I saw it pop up and say, alright cool, now buy the game and wait until it comes out. And suffice to say, I was just sort of sitting there in my chair feeling numb. I looked at my screen with disgust. I just sort of sat there and it was just, you know? And when I looked down at my pants, well, I realized I have been lying to you this entire time. I don't want to have to wait to play that. It's disgusting. I want to play it now. That was the coolest fucking thing I've ever experienced. No word of a lie, every single second I spent conscious after playing the demo, I was thinking about playing 16. I had genuinely never felt more excitement for a game in my life. As the days went by, the 22nd of June came, and so did I. I grabbed the game, popped that bitch in my PS5, and goddamn, I cannot even begin to fathom a way to describe how good Final Fantasy 16 is. Every single thing about the game was amazing. Bro, like, the everything. It was so amazing. Thank you Pokemon for getting me into games. Thank you Final Fantasy 15 for getting me into the series. Thank you Square Enix for making the bloody thing. Thank you Soken for Find the Flame. Thank you Mum and Dad for creating and raising me. Thank you drug addicts I walk past on the street for not stabbing me, because I know you all really fucking want to. If it wasn't for all of these things, I would never have been able to play the best thing I've ever experienced in my life. If you have a PS5 and you haven't played 16, that's basically the same as not drinking water or breathing oxygen, dude. I promise you, you need 16 in your life. Everyone who ever says anything bad about the game are a bunch of peasant scrubs who are jealous of ascended individuals such as myself who have been blessed with the opportunity to play this game. Alright, but that's enough sucking off Final Fantasy 16 for today, because I gotta get to bed early tonight so that I can wake up and be ready to do it again tomorrow. But in all seriousness, thank you for watching this video. Again, if you watch this and have no idea who I am, I can guarantee you won't give a shit about this part. But this is a test to try and hopefully expand my channel a bit, because currently I only do Yakuza / Like a Dragon videos, so I don't know if this will get views, but I can guarantee it won't. And because it won't, I can say whatever I want to this section. Yeah, how about this? I don't care about Baldur's Gate 3. Can everyone stop telling me to play it? I'm not interested.